Hello and welcome to my talk about my trip to Australia. I'm recording this first part at home because I only remember to start recording a few slides in. Anyway, let's get going. In 2024, I'd spent 7 years at my company, which meant I got 2 months off to do anything I wanted at all. Obviously, to me, anything, and a lot of us here probably, would mean birding. So I thought I'd take advantage of this and go to the other side of the world for a bit. So I planned a trip around Australia. When I referred to this trip around Australia on various Australian Facebook groups that I'm in, some Australians objected because you'll see in a minute where I actually went was not really around it, it was more on one side of it. And here's just a little illustration that somebody posted of how big Australia is in comparison to Europe. So it fits inside. So here's Australia. My trip took me, I flew into Sydney initially. I actually flew from Hong Kong because I spent a week or so in Hong Kong doing a bit of birding there, including go to Mai Po and various other things, and also meeting up with Jen Woodward's brother Tim, who's a top birder there. But I'm not going to go into that in this talk. I'll put a link up to my blog at the end, so you can read about what happened there. So yeah, Sydney first, and then Tasmania, and then sort of almost initially just as sort of a change planes thing, I went to Melbourne, but I thought, well, I might as well spend some time here and visit the famous Western treatment plant or Werribee Poo Ponds, which we'll get to in a minute. And then finally up to Queensland, to Cairns, which was incredible. So clothing-wise, when you're packing for a trip like this, it's got a real variety of climates. So you're going from Tasmania, where I was in my very heavy clothing, like winter birding kind of clothing, and then all the way up to Queensland, where it's kind of tropical conditions and very, very, very hot. Well, it wasn't. It was 30 degrees or something like that. It didn't get into the ridiculous temperatures, but it's quite humid as well. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what makes Australia's birds special. You know, why it's a great place to go. One reason is that birds have been there a ridiculous amount of time. I mean, really, almost the origins of songbirds, it turns out, really were in Australia, and the fossils from millions of years ago are there. Sorry, I keep going back the wrong way. So 54 million years ago, fossils were found there. I'll show a family tree later on for just one particular example, but several families of Australian songbirds. They are, if you look at the sort of tree, they stayed, whereas the other things branched off to become all our other songbirds. And also just the fact that it's been isolated for millions of years, and also the way that trees are pollinated by birds in Australia means you get a very different set of birds. And it has the second highest number of endemic species in the world. So, and obviously an endemic is something you don't find anywhere else. So yeah, I got a little bit of information about why Australia's birds are special from this very good sort of kind of popular science book, but it's fairly sort of it's written by a kind of hardcore scientist, but he's tried to make it sort of accessible. But it's a really interesting read. Something I was recommended by a scientist, sort of PhD student I met while I was birding out in Tasmania, and she recommended this book. So this is sort of some of this is material from that book, just to get us set the scene. One thing about Australia is that it almost has too much sunshine for the plants that are there to use. So they end up having more sugar than they can use. So they photosynthesize to a mad degree. They end up with more sugar, so they have to sort of work out what we're going to do with all the sugar. And what happens in the end is that you just have lots of birds that they eat that sugar. And that's why we've ended up with birds pollinating plants, because they do things like kind of getting the sap or eating sugar off the backs of insects that have been sort of chuntering through sap and that kind of thing. So like I said, a lot of trees in Australia are bird pollinated. Another consequence of having birds that rely on getting sap from trees is that a tree will kind of have the food source lasts a long time if it's sap rather than something kind of temporary, a bit like berries or something. So it's worth defending a tree. So this is a New Holland honeyeater. So that's one of the birds that's kind of, you'll see kind of sparring at a particular tree, really, really defending a particular thing. So it's worth defending because the nectar source lasts a long time. The other obviously thing about birds compared to insects is that they can fly a really long distance, and that means that they can carry pollen, potentially across things like the strait between Tasmania and Australia and mainland Australia. So they can carry kind of advice. That's the way I saw it put, was that you can almost get advice from trees that are much, much further away about how to deal with new climate conditions. Anyway, back to the trip. So I flew into Sydney on the 12th of September. Well, I took off from Hong Kong on the 11th of September and then landed in Sydney in the morning of 12th of September. I'm going to be keeping a tally of how many birds I saw as we go on, just so you can sort of see how it progresses. So here's the running total. This is in Australia, not including Hong Kong. Started at 0 species. I took a taxi to Rose Bay Wharf, which is where I was staying, which is in north part of Sydney. Yeah, so I was staying there because I was booked on a Pelagic that was going out fairly nearby, and I just wanted to be near where that was leaving from, so I didn't have an early morning commute or something. When I'm always ready to make sound recordings with my phone, if nothing else, and so when I got out of the taxi, I heard a weird noise in the trees, which I recorded and then completely forgot about because I was jet lagged. And when I went back and looked through my recordings, I found it was actually a channel-billed cuckoo. So let's just listen to that recording now and listen out for, at the beginning you'll hear a channel-billed cuckoo, and then there's a kind of chattery noise, which is a masked lapwing. And then right at the end, if you listen very carefully, you'll hear a sort of funny noise, which is that's a very bad impression, but it's a pied currawong. So now I'm going to hand over to my past self, the person who was actually talking at the meeting. So you'll hear the sound slightly change now. So the first thing I did when I landed in Sydney was to take a ferry across to the main town, because I was actually quite a long way from the town centre, but the way to get around was by ferry. So just a tiny bit of tourism. When my sister found out I was going to Australia, she said, "Oh, are you going to go to all these things?" I said, "No, I'm going birding." So that's just my concession to tourism. Yeah. And the first place I went was, like a lot of people who go to Sydney, Helen went, and Sean, and is to go to the Botanic Gardens, because they're always a good place to kind of try and get familiar with common local birds. So that is a bit of a rubbish picture, but that is an extremely common bird in Australia called a noisy miner. So miners they're a kind of honey eater as well. I think, like I said, everything's honey eaters. So I just wanted to make a bit of a note about noisy miners, because if you look them up, you find quite a lot of stuff about them as a sort of pest species. So they're a native species, but they when they become common, they end up kind of driving out other species. Partly because this thing about defending a food source, but there's so many of them, and they do well. They do well when there's fragmented habitats, where things aren't. You don't have like just a continuous forest like you should do really in Australia. So as they've kind of cleared bits, the noisy miners have done well. And they do quite well around people. So apparently there has been a sort of thought about, oh, maybe we should start culling them, but I don't think they've really got that far. So I'll maybe send this thing around to anyone with interest at the end. But this is I found a paper about this, about approaches they might take. So here's a couple of birds in the Botanic Gardens. So this on the left is a magpie lark, and on the right is so these are both things that if you watch Australian dramas, you'll often hear that calling in the background, and same for the marsh lapwing as well. So it's quite a surreal bird to see really in marsh lapwing, because it's in very urban habitats. I think they're sometimes called marsh plover, or sometimes just Australians often just call them plovers. So the interesting thing about Australia, a lot of the birds are kind of really in your face, and people who aren't birders know about them. They'll sort of they'll recognise them. And then this is another one. So this is another thing I was quite familiar with even before going, just from kind of mugging up. This is the pied currawong. That's another very tame bird. It's just sort of everywhere. So the first thing I did on my first full day was to go down to Royal National Park, which is kind of the nearest sort of like, I don't know, proper kind of countryside forest thing you can get to from Sydney. And I wasn't hiring a car in Sydney. In various places in Australia I was, but in Sydney I decided to just do it on public transport. So I took a train and a taxi down to Royal National Park. So there's a drive. It's called Lady Carrington Drive. That's kind of part of it there. It just goes through really nice forest, and there's just loads of stuff. It's quite a good place to see lyrebirds. And I did see some. I'm not going to show any pictures because they're absolutely terrible, but we'll see one later. But they weren't singing there for some reason. I just stumbled on one. So everybody know what this is? Kookaburra, yes. So that was taken with my phone. So it shows how tame they are. So that was quite exciting to see that initially. So that, if people don't know, it's a type of kingfisher, but it's a thing that's just everywhere in Australia, all the way up actually to Queensland as well. They've been introduced to Tasmania a while ago. It was to control snakes, supposedly. So, but I mean, snakes that are supposed to be there. So I think it kind of backfired. So. Well, they eat snakes, and sort of general reptiles and stuff like that. So a lot of kingfishers in the world don't eat fish. So, so kingfishers, kookaburras are not waterbird type thing. They're a sort of bush kind of thing. So obviously, people who know me, I'm really into bird sounds and stuff like that, and I'm used to kind of knowing what everything is. So it's quite scary in a way. Going to Australia is sort of like just rocking up and saying, well, I've no idea what any of it is. I've got no context at all. So I just wanted to play a little bit of one of my first sound recordings. So So that's a very typical sort of Australian sound. So that kind of whistly sound actually is called a whistler. So it's something called a golden whistler. And in the background there, also there was that's shining bronze cuckoo. Although I didn't know that at the time. So, you'd hope that something like Merlin would work in Australia. You know, you're somewhere where you're not familiar with birds, but actually right now it doesn't, because it needs more training data. And there's actually a load of sound recordists in Australia kind of trying to make a special effort to get more samples so that they can so it'll start to work, and it is starting to come on. But what I used instead was something called BirdNet, which is a bit of a clunkier thing, but it has much more coverage of species, and I found it actually worked quite well. It was mainly right, actually, because I checked with other birders, or also just I found the bird and sort of said, you know, he says there's one of these here, and it turned out that's actually what it was. So yes, I'll just show some pictures of things I saw in Royal National Park. So this is quite a common but pretty bird. It's a golden whistler, so that's what was making the noise in the previous thing. Anybody know what this is? One of the robins, yeah. So that's the eastern yellow robin. So it's called eastern just because we're on the east part of Australia. I think there's a western yellow robin as well, so go Perth or something. These things are, of course, are not robins. They're called robins, but they're not robins as in they're not related to our robin here at all. They're just called that in sort of homage by settlers who went there. So these are, I don't know, I can't remember where they sit in the family tree, but you know they're kind of part of this whole complicated, primitive set of birds where our birds came from. This is a fairy wren, yeah, superb fairy wren. They all have they have names like superb, lovely. I think it's splendid. I can't. There is splendid, isn't there? Yeah. So there's like they sort of run out of superlatives. Yes, that was in a bit of a dark setting, so that's why it's not as bright as it should be, really. This is another honey eater. This thing was making this sort of like machine gun rattle-like noise, which is very distinctive. And then I think I somehow figured out what it was eventually. So this is a Lewin's honey eater. So it's named after some guy called Lewin. I think he's got a rail as well, Lewin's rail. And that's actually the same picture as I showed earlier, but that's an eastern spinebill. So that was down at. So this is another honey eater. Right, so sorry, this is jumping around a bit, but so the main sort of thing I was planning to do in Sydney was to go on a pelagic, which was just out of Sydney Harbour basically. So we sort of headed out of I think about 20 miles, something like that, off the coast. So this is something. This pelagic is actually run. I think it's run every month of the year. And the first thing I did when I was sort of sorting out my trip was to find out what pelagics there are, because they often book up really quickly. So a pelagic is, if you don't know, it's a boat trip where you go out into what's called the pelagic shelf. It's kind of almost like, I guess it's almost like where the proper open ocean starts, and you get these kind of upswellings of food that birds feed on. But what have I said next? Yeah, so they go out once a month. So there's various places in Australia where they'll do a pelagic once a month. The other one, there's one down at Wollongong, which is not that far away from Sydney. And there's a really famous one out of Tasmania, which I'm quite bitter about because I booked on that, but it got cancelled. Places go very quickly. So that's the first thing I sorted out. And the exciting thing about Australia is that Antarctica is quite near, really, relatively speaking. So you can get some things that you wouldn't normally see in Antarctica. The pelagic I was on was for some reason they weren't using like the classic absolutely stinking chum type thing. They were using they seem to be just chucking loads of salmon. I don't know where they got all this salmon from. So there's a black-browed albatross over there, just having a bit of a tuck into some salmon. So that's the same species as turned up at Bempton Cliffs a few years ago. So it's the one that occasionally makes it across the doldrums. But they're pretty common down there. Along with shy albatross actually breeds sort of not that far off the Australian coast, so you see them a lot. So I just wanted to make a list, though. I shouldn't have made these individual items really, but this is, oh, sorry. So that's the list of birds that we saw on the trip. So yeah, what was quite good about this particular Pelagic was that the people running it were very sort of kind of diligent, I suppose, about making sure everybody saw everything. So I kind of feel like I did actually see everything. Unlike another one I went on a few years ago, where it's just sort of like just constantly people shouting out, "Oh, there's this and there's that," and you kind of miss things. I was very concentrated on not losing my lunch in this trip, so I didn't take that many good pictures. But I got in touch with somebody who was on the boat, and I said, "Do you mind if I put up some of your pictures?" Because he was an incredible photographer. So I'm just going to show you a few of these pictures. The guy who took these pictures, I saw online the other day, he was posting about something. He said that he dropped his camera off the boat, so I've no idea how much that cost. I don't know why it wasn't tethered to him somehow. So this is one of the birds. Does anybody know what this is by any chance? A little quiz. It's what used to be. I think it used to be called Cape Petrel. Now it's called a Pintado Petrel. Yeah. If you look really, really closely, you maybe can't see this on. But look down here. It's got a ring. So it was ringed, so that people were taking amazing pictures, and I think they nearly got the number. I don't think they quite did. It would have been quite interesting to see where it comes from. So that was one of the ones that got everyone excited. So this one is an Antarctic species as well. It's called a white-headed petrel. That's another picture by mate Sam. And this was around quite a bit as well. It's got this very distinctive kind of double wing bar. That's all called Providence petrel. I had a bit of a look up to see why it's called that, and it turned out the reason was because people were eating it. So it's called Providence petrel because they thought, this bird has been provided just by for us to eat. So they carried on. So I think they were shipwrecked there, and they sort of couldn't. It's a long time ago. They couldn't get off, and they just had to keep eating these birds. Well, they didn't have to, but. And they thought they might have taken about 1 million birds, but it's still kind of doing sort of all right. But it is literally, I think it's the next. Yeah, they were also breeding on another island which is uninhabited, and I don't think anyone got there. And now nearly all of them live there on Lord Howe Island. So they're still sort of doing all right. I think they're listed as like least concern, even though they're basically just all on this island. So if like someone can introduce a predator there, then that'll be it, really. Right, so. I've jumped in a slightly strange way in some of these slides, but so the next thing I did was to go up to Blue Mountains, which is a place people go because it's pretty, which it is pretty, but obviously I was more interested in the birds. But that's a picture of some of the scenery. I think it's called the Blue Mountains just because, I don't know, sometimes the mountains look a bit blue. So this is a bird that it's quite a common bird that I saw up there. It's called striated thornbill, and it's got a caterpillar, so that's partly why I shot it. So I realised we found something on the Warton Crag, a trip to Warton Crag recently that was it looked a bit like this caterpillar. It had a little horn on it. It was actually a hummingbird hawk moth. So I think this is some kind of hawk moth that it's got. Obviously, it's struggling to. I don't know how it's going to actually eat that. And then the other great thing at Katoomba in the Blue Mountains was it's a really nice place to see lyrebirds, and really, really, really going for it as well. So I'm just going to play a little clip of this one. That's what they call the space laser noise. For obvious reasons. So a lot of what live birds do is sort of imitation, but they also have their own sort of. I suspect this is imitating something. I don't always know what you're imitating. Goes back through space lasers again. Yeah. I think this is. I think it's a young male because its tail's not huge. Yeah. Anyway. Enough of that. And then just to show you some sort of common birds that you get hanging around. This is the sort of thing like non-birders would notice. This is crimson rosella. So there's an awful lot of parrots in Australia, various different types. There's rainbow lorikeets are everywhere. I don't think we've actually got a picture of them, but they're very, very common. And I just put this in. I'll just show the video, but. Small, isn't it? So you can see this is, you would, if you came from Britain, you'd say, well, this is a tree creeper. Well, it's called a tree creeper. So this is white-throated tree creeper, which is quite a thing that's in Australia a lot. I think this is going to be, so I'm just going to have to do a little, yeah. But if you look at the family tree here, so you've got tree creepers here, you've got bowerbirds, but if you kind of follow it back, all up here you've got all other songbirds, and then you've got bowerbirds, tree creepers, scrubbirds. So these are all Australian birds. Well, there's some New Zealand birds down there as well. But you see what I mean? They kind of like you start off, you branch off some primitive ancestor, and then these are these are some of the Australian birds, and then you basically got just everything else. So it just shows how ancient these things are.
So is our tree creeper in the tree creeper branch?
No. These are like Australian tree creepers. So I think our tree creeper would be over here somewhere. Yeah. As far as I know, I need to look. Oh, sorry. So how are we doing for time? Is that
5 minutes.
5 minutes, right? Good. Tea break, right? So so the next thing I did in my itinerary was to go to Tasmania, and I was very excited because I had a place on like one of the best pelagics in the world, but unfortunately it was I think it was as I was landing, I got an email from the organizer saying a couple of days before it was going to happen, saying, oh, the weather forecast is bad, so we're cancelling. And then actually on the day it was supposed to be, it was obviously a very nice day, it wasn't too windy, and then the wind came the next day. That's the way forecasts work, isn't it? I just wanted to show a little map, just in case you didn't know where Tasmania was. It's quite a big island. I wish it would be nice to sort of show it in relation to Britain or something. I suspect it might be like the size of Scotland or something, I don't know, but it's pretty big. But it's off the coast of Australia and far enough away that it's got its own endemics. So it's got its own things that you can't find in the rest of Australia. So as well as being endemic to Australia, they're endemic to Tasmania as well. So there's 12 of those, and they're actually mainly fairly easy to see, which is quite nice. So you've got a little target. I ended up falling one short. So the first one is Tasmanian native hen. We'll see. I'll show some pictures of these as we go through. But so there's 12 of them. So let's rattle through them. So that's a flightless bird at Tasmanian native hen. Then the other one is green rosella, which is a type of parrot. You've got one of the other robins. Got Tasmanian thornbill, scrub tit. That's the one I didn't see. Tasmanian scrub wren, yellow wattlebird. They've got a few honey eaters here. Lots of honey eaters. And then a thing that looks, it is a currawong, but it's completely black. And then a very cute bird, and also quite slightly difficult to see. It's called 40-spotted pardler. It sounds like a mad name, really, doesn't it? But, they're a very special bird. So I just wanted to give the running total. So as I entered Tasmania, I was on 90 species. Where I actually went in Tasmania was, I should have showed this on the map really, but this is off the south coast of Tasmania. It's another island. So it's an island off an island. It's called Bruny Island. It's sort of smallish. You can kind of drive all the way. I think it's like 12 miles long or something like that. But you can actually see all the endemics there, and it's a beautiful place as well. I wonder if we should maybe stop for tea there, and then we'll carry on.
Thank you, David.
Right, we ready to get going again? Yeah. Oh, that's even higher. Right. I realised in the interval I think I have to bend down. I need a sort of next slide, please. Chris Whitty kind of thing. Anyway. Right. So we're on Tasmania now. So I stayed in Bruny Island, which is this very, very picturesque place. It feels a bit like Scotland, and it also felt a bit like Scotland in terms of climate as well, because it was quite chilly. So I'd taken these sort of long johns and things like that because I thought I'd need them for the pelagic, but it turned out I just needed them for just walking around. It was quite sunny, but it was very chilly, which is not what you expect with Australia, really. So this is where I was staying in Tasmania, which is it was one of these things where someone's kind of made a sort of like a glamping pod, I suppose, in a way. But it was quite souped up. He called it a shepherd's hut. And he had this thing on a huge plot of land. Like people in Australia, people just seem to have enormous tracts of land, which I suppose, in a way, it's kind of stolen from the Aborigines. This guy had this thing, just a couple of places to stay in this enormous tract of land. I just wanted to play a little bit of what it sounded like early in the morning, first morning I woke up. Just to sort of compare what a dawn chorus sounds like in Australia versus here. I mean, I would argue in some ways ours is better, but but it still just shows how different songbirds are in Australia, I suppose, in a way. If you listen, you'll hear what sounds like, occasionally you'll hear what sounds a bit like somebody throwing up, and that is a yellow wattlebird. And that kind of creaky noise is, so that main thing is grey shrike thrush, which is quite a common thing. You've also got pallid cuckoo there, that's the throw up noise. And then you've got the sort of noise you hear from time to time is yellow-tailed black cockatoo, which is quite a spectacular bird. I think you can hear spotted dove there as well, which is a bit like collared dove, an introduced species. There's all sorts of stuff there, but it's not, in a way, it's not very musical, I think. But it's home to Australians. Yeah. So this is the first of the endemics. It's probably the first one I saw when I got off the plane, actually. This is Tasmanian native hen. It's a flightless bird, which to me is quite an exotic sort of thing. I think it might be possibly the first flightless bird I've seen, actually. So I think it's one of these things where, a bird is isolated on an island and sort of there aren't any predators, and it sort of thinks, well, maybe I don't need to fly really. It sort of just ends up just kind of losing its wings. That's not really how. But anyway, so they're everywhere, and Tasmanians call them turbo chooks, sort of like, because they run around. So they don't fly, but they can run quite fast. They're like very fast chickens. This is actually not an endemic, but it's quite a pretty bird. And my camera is not really quick enough, especially in forests, to be able to pick things up quickly. I just have a bridge camera. So this is a crescent honey eater. I think it's called that because of the, see that sort of crescent thing there. I was hearing these all over the place to start off with. In fact, I think initially I thought they were a parrot of some sort. The noise, I mean. But yeah, it's quite a distinctive call. And I've jumped straight to the sort of highlight of the thing. But this is the endemic that was hardest to see. It's called 40 spotted pardalote. It's called 40 spotted because I think if you were to count all these spots, which you can't really see because it's a bit of a blurred picture, but these, I think it's 40 of them because it's got a 20 on each side. It's superficially similar to a much commoner species called, well, it's superficially similar to a young spotted pardalote. It's spotted? Yeah, it's spotted. Yeah, the common one. But obviously it has other differences, like it's got this kind of yellow in the face and stuff like that. But yeah, it just became a bit of a bête noire in a way because it was so difficult to find. There was an easy way to see them, which was to go to this place called Inala, which is like a nature reserve, but you have to pay to get in, and you have to have a guide. So I'd have to have paid about 150 quid or something just to see this bird. I thought, I'm not doing that. And also, I thought it'd be more fun to try and find them. But they are sadly extremely rare now. But they're very concentrated, so they're not very, very difficult to see. But there are actually less than 1,000 birds just left in total. It's partly because they're very, very specific about what kind of tree they want. It's this thing called a white gum. And I was talking about sugar earlier on. So they feed on the sugar that comes out of these trees, and they actually kind of harvest it in a way by cutting grooves into the tree. I actually didn't know this at the time. I saw that after I came back, but I was more concentrated on just trying to find the bloody things. But yeah, so that's what they're doing all the time. Is kind of cutting out these grooves to eat sugar. Presumably they have to eat something else as well. You can't just eat sugar all the time. But they also feed on this interesting thing called a lerp, which is another sort of consequence of the surfeit of sugar, is that you get these insects that eat, they kind of eat through the sugar to try and get other things that they need from the sap. And then they don't need all that sugar, so they end up excreting it and put it on their backs. And then birds eat the stuff off the backs, but they don't eat the bird. I'm just going to whip through some of these a bit quicker. But so this is another Tasmanian endemic. It's another honey eater. It's interesting that I found out that they used to hunt these things because they were quite tasty, apparently. Which is a bit of a shame, but. So yeah, like I said, so that's what they sound like. You could hear that a little bit in the other recording. Yeah. Just to sort of cover it off, this is you won't really be able to tell from this video, but this is a Tasmanian thornbill. It's extremely similar to the much commoner thing called brown thornbill, but it's to do with the colour in the wing. Yeah. So this is another Tasmanian. So it would have been nice if you see a thornbill on Tasmania, it's a Tasmanian thornbill. Unfortunately, you also get this brown thornbill as well. So you have to have a good look at them. This is a dusky robin. It's another endemic. It's quite easy to find. Any guesses as to what this might be? This is a honey eater, and it has a yellow throat, so it's a yellow throat honey eater. Yeah. And this one is a honey eater, and it has a black head, so it's a black-headed honey eater. And this is the endemic parrot I was talking about. This is green rosella. Any guesses what this might be? Black currawong, yeah. Yeah. And this is quite an interesting, another endemic honey eater, which is called strong-billed honey eater. And it acts a bit like a tree creeper. So you see it's kind of peeping around. It's quite a nicely patterned bird. It's got like Kind of a nice, I can hear a fantail cuckoo in the background there. That's a grey colour one called. Yes, it's got like a nice white nape. Sorry. There's a stupid bug with Google Slides. It means I have to keep doing this. Here's something that's not a bird. It's quite interesting. I was out birding with a couple of people who were also people who wanted to be on this pelagic but weren't, but then they carried on to Bruny Island. And they spotted this is it's not a very good picture, but you can see the hump of it. It looks a bit like a hedgehog, I suppose. It's an echidna, which is one of these egg-laying mammals. Mad thing, short. But on Tasmania, their spines, which normally look quite spiny, it's cold in Tasmania, so they have a lot of fur. So that fur is kind of coming up around the spines. Yes, that's for sure. On my last day on Bruny Island, the guy who owned the place, he showed me around his enormous plot of forest, and we stumbled on this incredible raptor, which is actually, I think, it's only one of 2 entirely white raptors in the world. So this isn't like a albino or leucistic thing or something. It's just one of the morphs of. It's a bit of a bad name really. It's a grey goshawk, but the other morph is actually grey, but this colour morph is completely white. And I think all the ones on Tasmania are white like that. Quite a special bird. Right. So next thing was on to Melbourne. I'll just put a little arrow there to show you where Melbourne is. And this is, I think I looked at what this bird was. Sorry, this plant. It is a native plant. I don't think it's native in Melbourne. I think this is a planted one. But it's called, what's it called again? It's called a Jaimea lily. I don't know how you actually say that. But they can grow up to 6 metres high. So it's a mad thing, really. And then on top of it is another honey eater. Sorry, I was just going to say my running total at this point was 143 species, so I was catching up a bit. So this is another honey eater. This one's called red wattlebird. So you remember the one in Tasmania had a yellow thing on hanging down there. This one's got a red one, so it's a red wattlebird. This is something that I spotted in again going to the Royal Botanic Gardens, but in Melbourne this time, and this is a bell miner. So I just put up some interesting facts about these. This is another kind of like native but sort of pest species. In this case, they actually basically destroy trees. So what happens is I was talking earlier on about these lerps, these things that insects are eating through sugar and then trying to get amino acids out of the sap, but then they're left with this sugar that they can't use, so they have to just poo it out basically, and it goes on their backs. So these bell miners, what they do is they kind of look after they're called psyllids. I don't know if are they like aphids? I'm not sure now, but they look after them and drive away other birds that would eat them, and they don't eat them, so that therefore the psyllids do really well. They eat all the sugar off them, and then the psyllids sort of drain the tree of sap, I think, basically, and then so the end result is they just kind of, there's too many of them, and then just eventually kill the tree. So they have this almost like bell miner mediated dieback. They're basically just killing trees. And I think again it's probably a consequence of habitat fragmentation, not deforestation, that sort of thing. And bell miners can do all right out of this, but other birds can't, and they're sort of driving other things away. The thing that people always want to do when they go to Melbourne is to go to the Western Treatment Plant. It's sometimes referred to as the Werribee poo ponds, but it's absolutely enormous. This is not my picture. I've just got this from the website of the water treatment company, Melbourne Water or something. But it's a huge area. I mean, I think if you want to go around it, you sort of need a permit, but also you can just tag along with someone, a local, which is what I did. I just found some people on Facebook who said, "Oh yeah, you can come along with us, so we'll go out for the day." and it's an incredible place to go. You stay in your car all the time, and they sort of encourage that, partly for sort of disturbance, but also I think like for safety, because it's got kind of an industrial site, I suppose. And yeah, so we ended up sort of covering about 30 miles, I think, in the end. Oh yeah, I just thought it was quite funny, this sign. It says the following activities are strictly prohibited, and then it says any activity that is not birdwatching. That's quite good advice, isn't it? Yeah. So this looks kind of familiar, doesn't it, in some ways? It looks a little bit like a ring plover, but with sort of extra bits. But this is what they call, sorry, mine's gone blank. I think I might have. It's a dotterel or something. It's called black-fronted dotterel. Sorry, yeah. So they refer to it as a dotterel, but it's nothing like any kind of dotterel we know. But that's kind of what they do with plovers in some parts of the world. So black-fronted dotterel. These are. Does anyone know what these are? That's right. Yeah. So it's a bit of a mad-looking goose. Again, I looked at why they're called Cape Barren goose, and it's because again some sailors were wrecked on south of Cape Barren Island, and they used the goose as a source of food, but they didn't wipe them out, unfortunately. I don't really know. I mean, they're in Melbourne, obviously, but they must. I suppose they're doing okay-ish. Anyone know what this is? It's a brolga, yeah. So it's one of those words that sounds good in an Australian accent, isn't it? Brolga. Yeah. So this is one of two cranes in Australia. The other one is a Saris crane, which you also get, or Saris, I think. You also get that in India, I think. Yeah, so this is one of two. So that's the brolga. I think they're quite special in some ways around there. People seem to get excited about seeing them. I was as well. But these are some, like, wrong avocets, sort of like bad avocet. Well, I think it's quite nice, but yeah, that's called red-necked avocet. And what else have we got here? Yeah, there's this weird thing where for some reason they have this thing called the crake pond, and it has the crakes are sort of like quite easy to see. So this is a Baylands crake, which I thought of as an extremely skulky species. I mean, I went to see one at Raynham Marshes once, and I sort of stood there for 3 or 4 hours and saw it for 30 seconds and it just disappeared again. But for some reason it was just quite happily kind of coming out here. This is sort of will look quite familiar in some ways because it's related to our the kite that you get in like Spain, and actually at the moment here there's one down in Norfolk which is the black winged. We call it black winged, don't we? So this is black shouldered kite. It looks very similar to our thing. I don't think it's not a weird split or anything like that. I think it's always been regarded as a different species because it is different. I actually had two days out. This was on the second day. So another group of people said, you can come all with us as well. And when the person who spotted this originally said, she said, orange belly parrot, which is an incredibly rare bird. It turned out that it's a slightly wrong shade of green around here, and actually this is called a blue-winged parrot, but it's still nice to see anyway. Yeah, so orange belly parrot is this thing that's almost gone extinct, but they're kind of doing a reintroduction program. It migrates from here, actually, the Western Treatment Plant, I think, all the way down to Tasmania, but a very, very difficult place to get to in Tasmania. This is a cisticola, is that how you say it? Cisticola? A golden-headed cisticola, which makes quite a weird noise. I don't think I've got recording? No, I don't think I have. No, but I didn't get a particularly good recording of this. But yeah, it doesn't sound like how what we used to call fan-tailed warbler at all, but it's the same family. Can anyone tell what this might be? So this is a parrot, and this bit here is red. So what would you call that? Red-rumped parrot. Exactly. Yes, that's what that is. That actually wasn't in the Western Treatment Plant. That's just something you can see in the parks in Melbourne. I went into what's called the Dandenong Ranges at one point. Well, actually a couple of times, because it was kind of a place you could get to on the train. I didn't hire a car here either. I hired a car in Tasmania and Cairns, but not here. So I was getting around on the train and lifts and that sort of thing. I just wanted to play you a little clip of what Australians talk about as their finest singer. So you can see what you think. See if you think this is as good as a blackbird. I don't think so. This is a kind of a duet between two of them. So they're kind of answering each other, I think. Waiting a bit. He's not really doing all that much. I don't know. I mean, I probably
like it's learning.
Yeah. So that's Australia's best singer. I don't know. Maybe they sing better sometimes, but this was an exciting moment. I did really badly for owls because I'm just terrible at finding owls anywhere. I heard boobox a couple of times, but this was a sort of famous celebrity owl. In a park in Melbourne. It's near the museum. It's called Carlton Gardens. And I'd heard that it was here, but obviously it's just sitting there roosting, so you have to know exactly which tree it's in, basically. And I didn't have any way of finding that out. But then I spotted somebody had reported it on eBird, and he was an English guy who was over there for a conference. And I'd met him a couple of days before. So I Googled him, found his academic email address, sent him an email, and he replied like within the hour, saying, he sent me a video showing exactly where it was, and I sort of dashed back to the park. And but then when I got to the park, there was a lot of people standing under the tree, so it was extremely easy. And there's just a nice little coincidence here. So these people this is the group of people who were watching. They were also academics, and the guy there used to work with Stuart Sharp. He's called there's the guy who works at Lancaster Uni. So he's called Ben Hatchwell. He's an expert on long-tailed tits. But what they're looking at is this is under the tree. You can see like sort of various furry bits. They were trying to work out what the owl was eating. It might have been possums, but they also thought it might have been rats. But yeah, you can see little bits of fur and little bones and stuff like that. The other thing I did while I was in Melbourne, because someone from the Northern Hemisphere is very excited to see penguins. So there is a place, you can go to Phillip Island and see penguins, and it's a bit of a faffy thing. But what I did instead, I sort of did my own DIY version where I knew they came in at dusk, but you can't actually get down to where they come, the jetty. So I just sat on the beach and then just watched these dots come closer and closer and closer. And this is the photo. So you can see they weren't really that close. That was actually taken by a South African guy, another academic who was visiting, and a PhD student. I'd met him the day before as well, but he just suddenly turned up on the beach, and I thought, well, as a South African, he'd know what penguins were, whether they were penguins or not, and he confirmed that they were. And they were a bit closer than that photo shows, but they were just swimming, obviously, like not going to fly, are they? So they just kind of get closer and closer and closer, and then go up to this sort of breakwater type thing, and that's where they nest. It's called St Kilda, confusingly, even though it's like obviously just a nice little beach. It's not an incredibly remote Scottish island. So next place, I think 15 minutes or something. Is that okay? Yeah, just do through this. So next stop on the tour was Cairns, which is what you call far north Queensland. So it's just before you get up to what's called the Cape York Peninsula. So Cape York Peninsula is this bit up here. And I didn't get up there, but that has some incredible birds as well. Like loads of things you don't find anywhere else. So that's me flying. That's just flying to Cairns. That's the beach in Cairns. We'll just have a quick species check. So by the time I got to Cairns, I was at 192 species, and I was sort of starting to think, I don't know if I'll get much beyond 200. I didn't realise how incredible Queensland was. So one of the first birds you see a lot when you turn up in Cairns is these things called pied imperial pigeons, which are a sort of spring-summer visitor. And they actually fly down. I think I've got this as a... Yeah, so they're very powerful flyers, and they come from Papua New Guinea, which is obviously north of Australia, and they fly down every spring. And what's quite interesting is it talks about this in this Where Song Began book. They kind of play a role in carrying seeds really, really long distances because they can fly really, really well. And so they might eat a seed somewhere and then fly out to some island that's miles away, and then that island is then, plants that seed there. And that plant will then establish. These are really nice birds that you get up in Cairns. It's a bush stone curlew or bush thickney. I don't know what this really official name is. They sometimes just call them curlews up there, confusingly. So that's a very familiar bird to locals. I think they find them a bit annoying as well, actually. Yeah. I mean, they were sort of like guarding the car park and stuff. But they should be all over Australia, but they're not. Partly because they've introduced predators. It's a huge problem with foxes in Australia. But it just breeds in urban areas, and it's sometimes referred to as a murder bird. See if you can see why. That's what they sound like. I don't know if it's because they're doing the murdering or if they sound like they're being murdered. It's slightly, it's like psycho, isn't it? Yeah. So some people don't like them for that reason. Some non-birders find, because this is at night as well. They're nocturnal. They're making all that racket. So I heard that from my bed at night. It didn't keep me awake. So the Cairns Esplanade is very famous for waders. So it felt a bit like being at home in some ways. So the numbers are actually a little bit smaller, but quality was obviously very good. So this is Pacific golden plover. I don't really have to wonder whether it's what kind of golden plover it is. It's just because that's where you are. That is the Pacific golden plover. So they breed up in the Arctic. They don't have our knot, not much anyway. They have them. There's sort of one in Melbourne, but mainly what they have is a great knot. At the front here, you can see this is a bar-tailed godwit. So that's a different population of bar-tailed godwit than what we have here, but it's the same species. I think it's called Bowerai or something. Just some other waders. We've got sharp-tailed sandpiper. So it's quite weird when you're a UK birder going here, because you're sort of saying all these things would be unbelievable rarities in the UK, but it's just something really, really common. So sharp-tailed and sandpiper and redneck stem are just, everywhere. And then the first time I've ever seen a tattler, that's quite interesting. It's a grey-tailed tattler. And then this is a real sort of like, boyhood dream type thing. We see a pteric sandpiper. I didn't really have a good photo of this. I didn't really have a video of it. So you see the my shaky camera work, but see the upturned beak there. Anyway, so that's that one. Let's do this again. Right. So I'm just going to whiz through these a bit quickly. I just want to get to some other stuff. But so this is a rose-crowned fruit dove, which you can see on the Esplanade in Cairns. Another spot around Cairns that people go to a lot is called Katana Wetlands. So it's just kind of a basic sort of load of lakes. It started out as a sugarcane place, and now it's managed for wildlife. This is quite an exotic-looking bird. Really, this is called sometimes people call lily trotters or something, but it's a jacana, Crown-crested jacana. People non-birders were asking me, have you seen the Jesus birds? So that's what we call them. They're a bit like dotterels or whatever. The males look after the chicks, and they grab onto them and they fly around with them apparently. This is a black-necked stork, which is quite an exciting bird. So that's the I think that's the only stork in Australia. People often call them jabberoos, but the jabberoo is actually a South American stork. but it seems to persist. We'll just continually call them jabiroos. There was a place called Jabiru Lake at Catana Wetlands, but we really shouldn't call them jabiroos at all, because they're not. Yeah, it's just an interesting thing about the distribution. They've got a little gap here, where for some reason they're here and here, but not in the middle. I don't know why. This is it's called an orange-footed megapode. Quite a funny name, isn't it, really? Orange-footed scrubfowl. So it's one of these things that kind of builds a huge mound for its eggs. They make quite a funny noise as well. In the background there, you can hear just about that sort of noise. It sounds about like a train track. That's a green oriole. Yeah. I just wanted to get on to so one place that's really worth going to when you're in Cairns is to take a boat out to Michaelmas Cay, which is on the Great Barrier Reef. So people who aren't birders go there because it's like snorkeling and everything. In fact, snorkeling was included in my trip, in my ticket, but I didn't do any because I was looking at the birds. So it's a sand island. It's got enormous numbers of birds. It's got like 40,000 birds on it, and of various different types. But there's terns. 40,000 seabirds. So you've got things like brown booby. Can you tell which one's the male? Yeah. Yeah. So the male's got a blue beak as well, which is another giveaway. Now you've got brown noddy. Which is a kind of tern. I think they have black noddy there as well.
Is that local?
Yeah. Well, because they're incredibly tame. Really, really close. I did take a sort of selfie with them because it was so close, but I haven't got that one here. So this is there's a group of them. There's an awful lot of them. And then we've also got sooty tern, which very occasionally see in the UK as well. I think it's one of the highest populations in Australia, sooty tern. And then you've got something that I was really excited to see was a frigate bird, which is one of these things that is a kleptoparasite, like a skewer. It kind of steals. And I actually saw it kind of flying around and stealing other birds, trying to steal the tern's lunch. And then you've got lesser crested tern, greater crested tern. I just wanted to show you a little bit of. This is in the boat trip. You can take you into this. Without snorkeling, you can just kind of go and have a look at the reef. They were talking about how washout. This is an issue, isn't it? With global warming and everything, and acidification of the oceans. It is still there, but I think it's not as it was before. So people would, so all this fish and everything. But anyway, those aren't birds. So, I'm just going to quickly just get to just one very exciting bird I just want to get to before we finish. So, a place to go is the Atherton Tablelands are just up from Cairns. It's kind of a high plateau area, and one of the sites that people go is called this massive tree. It's called Curtain Fig Tree, and I went there very, very early in the morning and heard this. So I was finding it a bit hard to identify some of the bird sounds. So that one is very, very easy. That's it sounds a bit like a cat, and it's a catbird. So it's spotted catbird. Sorry, wait a minute. Oh, yeah. And then the same morning, so I was getting a bit dispirited in a way, like just standing here, like trying to hearing all these birds around and not knowing what they were. So I went to this other place called Lake Heacham, which is quite a popular wild swimming spot. But I don't know why people go. Apparently, there's only one, and it's very friendly. Apparently, but it's a freshwater crocodile, and it says here very few incidents have been reported involving people. because that's fine. So, there I met this couple who were travelling around Australia. They were actually ecologists, but they were sort of like having some time off and then having a massive road trip. And it was fairly competent birders. They were sort of getting into it, I suppose. But they'd staked out a couple of things, which I was really excited to see. So they said, in the car park, I just saw these people with binoculars in the car park. I said, "Oh, great, what are you looking at?" And so they said, "Oh, we've got a site for tooth-billed bowerbird and Victoria's riflebird, which are both really nice birds to see." So they took me to so Joe and Ruby. They showed me this place where the tooth-billed bowerbird. What they do is sort of just clear a bit of forest, get a particular type of leaf, turn it upside down, and then stick it on the ground. That is their display area. So other bowerbirds will make an actual sort of thing out of twigs and etc. So here he is, having a bit of a sing above his if you can call it singing. Here we go. Yeah, so that's a tooth-billed bowerbird. I think that's just what they look like. They're not. It's not like it looks. Possibly a young one, maybe, but I don't think they get any sort of more colourful than that. But yeah, you hear them around quite a lot. Right, I'm just going to get on to one more thing, and I think maybe we'll call it a day. So this was a really exciting bird. This is a bird of paradise, which you get and it's endemic to this part of Queensland. It's called the Victoria's riflebird. And it's called riflebird because I'll show you that the plumage is sort of like a bit like a kind of soldier. Is it? I've noted this down. Hang on. Oh no, I've lost it. Oh no, it's on here. Yeah, so it's supposed to look like someone from the British Army Rifle Brigade. But they do this incredible display where they raise their wings up above their head. So they do this thing, they go like this, and then they put them down one at a time. And you can see how he's on a little log. He's specially selected that tree stump. And I think sometimes they even peck at it a bit to sort of get it just right. And apparently the display gets more vigorous than that when there's females around, but he was just sort of practicing this one. But yeah, incredible bird. And it's got this incredible white, yellow gape as well, which let me just show you that. It makes a horrible noise, really. But it does make them quite easy to find. So that's quite a good way to find them. Just listen out for that. I sort of feel it looks a bit like a Muppet in a way. Yeah. Let's just finish. Let's finish on this. So actually, I should have stopped that a minute. This bird has various mnemonics about what it's saying. But I prefer the sort of slightly ruder version, which is saying bollocks to you. But if you listen, it does sort of sound like that. It's sort of like relatively difficult to see, but you hear them all the time. But you can see how brightly coloured they are. It's got like purple on the front. Yeah. So I think I have got a few more slides, but I'm just going to skip. I'm just going to skip to the end because. Oh, actually, let's just show you this one thing. But the chowchillas are incredible things as well. They're very primitive as well, like lyrebirds. They kind of go back a long way, and they kind of act a little bit like lyrebirds as well. So there's one going through. I just wanted to. Hang on, how much have I got? yeah, I've actually got a few more slides. I'm going to stop there though because it's getting too long. But I just wanted to say I've written up the whole trip. If you're interested on this, if anyone wants to sort of take a picture of this and get the QR code, or send it around as well. But there's I've written up the whole trip in a blog, so everything that's on here is on there in more detail as well. So if anyone wants to have a look, then feel free. And I'll just end with this picture of some fruit bats flying at sunset in that was like my last evening in Australia. So there we go, like a 1 metre wingspan. So yeah, that's it. Yeah. Has anybody got any? Yeah, so I mean, I think probably a bit short time, but if everyone's got any questions, then feel free. Yeah.
What was your total count in the end?
315. Yeah, yeah. The very last thing I saw was I had a very, very bad view of a Brahminy kite from the airport. But yeah, that was the last thing. I included a few herds in that, like I heard a Bassian thrush and heard a few owls. But yeah. Anybody else got?
Is the
yeah, keep going.
the brown hen in Tasmania?
Oh yeah,
Are
native hen.
Are
Yeah.
there any introduced predator cats and ferries?
I don't know actually. I mean, yeah, you would have thought they would. They're quite big, so it might be that I think there must be like feral stuff. They've got feral predators everywhere. So yeah. Yeah. So what were you?
Oh yeah, I was going to say. I thought your thornbill reminded me a bit of a wren, where they sort of move around and pop
Yeah.
tails.
I mean, only in the like this family tree of some Australian birds, and then all other songbirds. So it'll be that kind of. It'll only be as much as that. There's not really anything in Australia that songbird-wise that's closely related to anything here. They do have random things like coots. They have like Eurasian coot is there. It's not introduced. It's just there. Great crested grebe as well is there. So yeah. All right. Call it there, I think.
Okay, well, I think that wraps it up. I hope you've had a very nice time. I have. Lovely to see you all. And
hello again. This is me recording at home. I wanted to just show you the slides I didn't manage to get through in the time in the meeting. So here we go. So the next thing I did after being in Atherton was just go about an hour's drive further north to a place called Julatten, which is another spot where people often go when they go on birding trips up in Queensland. So I was going up there partly also to go up on a bit even further north into the Daintree, onto the Daintree River, to go do a trip there just for the morning, which I'll show you in a minute. But I just wanted to start off by just showing you the place I was staying, which is an incredible Airbnb in the middle of the forest. So it was down a track, completely private track. The owners kind of lived. You can kind of just see it coming into view, I think. Yeah, they were kind of behind where I was. But it was in the middle of this enormous tract of forest, a bit like in Tasmania, where they just owned an enormous area, which was completely private, and I could just wander around it. I think the only advice that my landlady made was just don't go barefoot because there might be snakes, but I actually never saw any. Yeah, so that was an amazing place to stay. At that point, I was on a running total of 277 species. So you can see, like, I've gone from like about 195 or something when I got to Queensland, and then jumped up to 277 because there's an awful lot of stuff there. I was looking at sort of eBird reports for the area, and noticed the report of noisy pitter, which is really exciting for me because any kind of pitter is a really exotic thing for a Brit. I found out later actually noisy pitter can go all the way down to New South Wales, so it wasn't like I needed to be in the tropics to see one. But anyway, so I went to this little patch of forest next to a nursing home where I'd seen a report of one, not thinking I stood much chance really, but then I suddenly realised I could hear it calling in the distance, because it's got a very distinctive call, which I'll play in a minute. I'll play my recording. It sounds like somebody saying walk to work. And I kind of walked through the forest. I realised afterwards it's sort of private, but no one bothered me. So I walked through the forest a bit. I could still hear it calling, and I thought, this is one time I did a little bit of tape luring, which I'm not really proud of, but so I played a tiny little bit of noisy pitter call, and immediately I heard a whirring of wings, and this thing flew down, and I got this video, which I'll show you now. So it's just a brief segment, because I couldn't actually get an actual sort of photo of it because it was too dark, so I just took a video instead. And then it didn't stay very long, and it sort of stayed about the time you can see on this video, and then whizzed off, and then carried on singing. So I got some recordings of it, which I can play. So I think that's probably the commonest pitter in Australia. There are a couple of other species. I think it's 4, isn't it? But this one's actually the commonest, really. But yeah, it's never that easy to see, I don't think. But yeah, so it was nice to see that. The next thing on the agenda is I took a trip. An early morning trip. I think it left at 6:30, so I had to leave my accommodation. I don't know, about 4:30 or something, just to be there on time. And down a quite windy road in the dark, which I didn't know it was going to be like this when I left, but got there. So this is a bit further north on the Daintree. So yeah, the Daintree River kind of is a big kind of obstacle. You actually have to get a ferry to get across it if you want to get to the other side, which I did later on actually. But first of all, I'm just going to talk about the cruise I went on, and lots of people I spoke to about the Daintree said, "Oh, you have to go on the river cruise, because it's really good." And this guy Murray is very, very good at finding birds, which was absolutely spot on. In fact, when I came back from the cruise and was just having a coffee in the cafe, I bumped into this bird guide, tour guide, who was taking a group of Americans around, and I kept bumping into him. He's an English guy, and I think he always just wanted a bit of a chat, actually, just to talk to some people who weren't kind of slightly rubbish American birders. Anyway, so yeah, but he came off the cruise. He'd been on a different trip, and he'd basically not really seen any of the stuff that we saw, so it just proved how great Murray is, really. So he uses a hybrid boat, so he can go very quickly, which he did at certain points, but he can also go very, very quietly, just kind of cruise along. So you'll see that in this this brief video. You can, if you listen, I'll just stop talking for a minute so you can hear how quiet it was.
Top of the trees straight in.
Right. So yeah, just put a link up to the guy's website there if you want to have a look. This was one weird thing on the cruise was he pointed out a log that was across, like kind of dangling from a branch, which he said that was the height of the last flood, which was just unimaginable, really. I don't know how high up that is, but it's just incredible. You can't imagine the water being that high. But you just there's been some terrible flooding up in Queensland. It kind of comes in a lot later than I was there, sort of into like December into January, I suppose. And the next, just to show you some of the amazing stuff we saw on the trip. He had it sort of staked out because you can see it's on a nest. This is a Papuan frogmouth. So I saw tawny frogmouth in a few places. It's quite fairly common. You sort of have to be told, oh, there's one there, and go and see it, because they're obviously nocturnal, but they roost quite prominently. And this one was on a nest. So Papuan frogmouth is a lot bigger. If it was awake, you could see it had orange eyes, but you can't really see that in this photo. And it didn't wake up while we were there. So, well, fortunately, we didn't wake it up. So that, as the name suggests, is not, it's not it's just poking into Australia in a way. In fact, when I looked at the distribution, it sort of says it's on the Cape York Peninsula, which is the bit much further north, just beyond the Daintree, and right up into the absolute far north of Queensland. This is a very bad picture of quite a nice bird everyone was very excited to see, called Little Kingfisher. It's not usually as bird as this, but so it's the second smallest kingfisher in the world, and it was quite diddy. But it only showed for a really short time, and that's why I've got this really blurred picture. But yeah, you see how it's sort of kind of almost like, not monochrome exactly, but just one shade of blue rather than all sorts of other things. So yeah, he kept spotting things in the distance, and then would kind of whiz the boat up to and sort of warn us what was coming. Well, one thing I quite liked about the way he did his tours is he'd just say, right, look up there, there, and get everyone onto the bird, and then tell us what it was, so we could kind of have a go at IDing it ourselves. Another highlight was this great-billed heron, which he spotted actually. Well, we'd seen one in a nest earlier in the trip. Well, near where they were nesting, but it just kind of flew as we went in the boat underneath. It just kind of flew over us. We didn't really get a very good view. You can see it's very big, but great-billed herons. It's got quite a big range. It goes all the way through Southeast Asia, all the way to Northern Australia. I think it kind of goes all the way across the top of Northern Australia as well, like including Northern Territory and everything. So it's pretty big, quite a lot bigger than our grey heron. In a way, you don't really quite get a sense of it from this photo, but maybe you can see how big its beak is. And the call that it makes, I didn't hear it. I didn't make a recording, but I just nicked this off the Inocanto. But it's supposed to sound a bit like a wild pig. In fact, actually, I met a couple in Cairns almost on my last day, and she was saying that one day they were out birding somewhere in the Northern Territory, and they just changed slides there. She doesn't like these wild boar pig things, and she heard this noise, and she said to her husband, "Oh, let's get out of here, there's pigs," and the guy said, no, it's not pigs, it's a great-billed heron. And you can sort of see why if you listen to this. So yeah, Peter de Groot got that recording. On the same day I did the cruise, after I got back, I decided, well, while I'm up here, because it was a bit of a drive up to that area, so I thought, because the cruise started at sort of like 6:30 in the morning, so we were back kind of for breakfast time really. So I thought, well, what should I do with the rest of the day? Well, I thought, well, I'll cross the Daintree, because people said, the Daintree rainforest was pretty good. So this is me on the car ferry. I think it was relatively expensive. I mean, not very, but just kind of. I thought, well, I hope this is worth it. And when I got over the other side, actually, there was very, very long traffic jams because they'd been doing these road repairs. So they basically just had one-way roads, and they had to just halt the traffic for half an hour or something while people came the other direction. And so anyway, so it was a bit of a trek getting there. So I went up there. This is a view across from, I think it was from the place I was waiting actually, for the traffic to move. So this is I actually didn't really see that many birds really up in the Daintree. It was quite an interesting place to go, and there was sort of like mangroves and little interesting crabs and that sort of thing. But actually, I didn't end up seeing that many birds. Not that I hadn't seen already. But then, as I was driving back, I was actually sort of saying, "Oh, let's just call it a day. I better head back. I don't want to be driving back that road again in the dark." So I started heading back. And then suddenly up ahead, I saw there's a van stopped in the road. And so I'd been seeing all these signs, saying, cassowaries, watch out for cassowaries. I think that's my car in the background, actually. There's another picture from the middle of the thing. You're really driving in. I thought, well, not seeing any yet. But then suddenly I saw this van stopped in front of me. So I just panically kind of pulled the car in because I could see what was ahead of it, and it was a cassowary right in the middle of the road. So I didn't get a video of it while I was while it was there. Unfortunately, it would have been absolutely even more spectacular, really. But it kind of sort of fairly quickly went back into the forest, and then I kind of just saw it moving through. So you can see it kind of walking around here. So it's just having a look around. I think this is maybe a male. It's got dangly bits. I need to check that properly, really. But this is outside the breeding season, so it didn't have any young with it or anything, because the males look after the young. And also, it didn't show any signs of, there is quite a lot of press about cassowaries attacking people and all this kind of thing, but it really was very docile. It wasn't, they don't do anything unless you feel threatened. And despite what people say about, this is the most dangerous bird in the world or whatever, they've only ever killed 2 people, and one person was someone who had it in captivity in America and don't know what he was doing with it, and the other one was early 20th century. There were 2 boys chucking stones at a cassowary, and it killed them. So they can kill people. They don't. I did hear a few stories from locals about them injuring people. So they don't want to cross them, but they're not sort of like the terrible menace that people kind of make out they are sometimes, especially on the internet. So I was still staying. Went back the same day, even though it was a bit of a drive, back to Julatten, where I was staying. So I stayed a few days and did a few bits and pieces around there. I just wanted to play a bit of dawn chorus. I think it was actually on my last day in Julatten. I just wanted to kind of give you a flavour of what a dawn chorus sounds like. This one, I played the earlier one from Tasmania. I was a bit sort of, dismissive of it in a way. This one is actually quite nice. It's still not quite as musical as a British dawn chorus, I don't think, but it's not bad. And what you can hear on this recording are, I'm not going to list everything you can hear, but one really distinctive thing to listen out for. It's got this sort of 5-note phrase. Something I heard a lot of around Julatten was around this wood was grey whistler, which has got a very distinctive song. It goes like that. So you can hear that fairly clearly, and then at certain points I think you can hear this sort of descending sort of like that. That's yellow spotted. Yeah, I think yellow spotted honey eater. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, there's lots of other things as well that I actually don't know what they all are. But there's some kind of I think it's emerald dove or something like that. Something I never actually saw, but kept hearing some kind of dove species in the background as well. That's like that sort of ooh noise you can hear. So let's just have a listen to this as we've got time. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that last dawn chorus. I'm just going to put my end slide up from the talk. If you're interested, have a look. You can read about the whole trip. Either scan this QR code or look at the. I'll put a link in the description. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this director's cut of my bird club talk about Australia.